Hey, this is Ina, and I want to talk to you today about Karl Marx's theory of alienation. And Marx's theory of alienation was largely attributed or largely found in his writings called the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844. But that's not the whole of the story, as will become clear fairly shortly. Now, Marx, in the era of the Second International, after his death, is largely associated with economy and politics, Das Kapital, the Communist Manifesto, these famous big-name works that supposedly reveal a deterministic Marx, which is not true. A Marx who is saying that we are predestined to reach the socialist millennium at some future point. The Marx who analyzed the laws of capital, the economist. And that's the Marx that was inherited by the great theoreticians and party leaders of the Second International. Sarcasm implied. And then we have the Third International associated with the Bolshevik Revolution. And we have an outpouring of Marxist thought. And a lot of scholars were very much in the Soviet Union and elsewhere and activists were pushing to develop Marxism in light of the Bolshevik Revolution. And at the same time, we have the development of the Frankfurt School and new modes of Marxist thought, and they're looking to get past a lot of the deterministic elements that have not so much found in Marx himself, but really in a lot of his interpreters. And in the early 1930s, a lot of the older works of Marx were published. For instance, the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844 and the German Ideology, written in 1846 with Friedrich Engels. And these works show a different kind of Marx, a Marx concerned with philosophy and humanism. And especially after World War II, and the revelations of Khrushchev about Stalin and the whole development of consumer society, you had a lot of interest in these early works of Marx. You had philosophers, activists who were very much interested in Marxism, but they don't really like the Marxism that exists in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. They're not really big into the social democratic parties that are reformists. So they're looking at a lot of these older works of Marx, and you have these controversies that are developing between those who are pitting the young Marx against the old Marx. And these tend to be humanists, some are theologians, some are calling themselves Marxist humanists, and they're saying, no, the real Marx is found in these early works. Then on the other hand, you have those largely associated with the Soviet-style parties and the orthodoxies saying, the real Marx, he's found in Capital. He's found in the Manifesto. Those are just youthful writings when he's still a Hegelian. And someone who's kind of associated with this, and there are differentiations I should make, but I don't have time in the video. Louis Althusser, who dealt a lot with this, who really didn't, he thought the early works of Marx were before he fully developed the philosophy and science of Marxism. And you have this real contrast between the two. Well, in my view, and there are other Marxist scholars who've picked this up, both even before the 50s and 60s, Ernest Mendel, Esteban Mazaros, Bertil Ohlmann, even Sidney Hook before he went to the dark side, look at Marx, young and old, as a rather continuation. There are certain breaks in his thought, there are certain developments, but largely, the young and the old can't be separated. And associated with this is Karl Marx's theory of alienation, developed in the early 1840s. And alienation, a lot of actually works, the writings of the young Marx, the concepts of the alienation, the full development of the human potential, are very much found in the works of the older Marx as well. You can actually find, I believe, alienation developed in his outlines for Das Kapital, and I think in Das Kapital Volume 3. The concept of alienation is actually, it's very much should be associated with Marx's labor theory of value and the exploitation of the worker under capitalism. And in my view, and in my actual personal experience of course, working for a boss, I feel like alienation is something that most people, workers under capitalism, experience in one way or another. And the alienation should not be counterposed to Marxist theories of capitalist exploitation of the working class, but are very much a complement of it. Now, alienation is, what does the alienation of labor consist? Well, the work is external to the worker. When you work, you're not working to develop your potential. You're not an artist who can freely paint, who can freely write. You're not an architect who's designing because you want to develop your physical and mental capacities. You're working to fulfill a need, for money that you need for the basic necessities of food and shelter and so on. You need them to live. But an artist is working to develop their potential as an artist. This is assuming you're not dealing with the constraints of money. You're developing your full potential as a person. But under capital, the work is external to you. And that's kind of a shame because our ability to labor, to think with our head, to use our hands is what makes us human. We've built individually and socially civilization itself, for good or ill. We've built it. And suddenly what makes us human, this ability to labor, is something that's not our prime need to develop our full potential. It's something it's external. It's imposed upon us. Because now we're working for a boss. We're working for someone, and our labor belongs to them. So the very thing that makes us human is something that when we're using it for a boss, it's something imposed upon us. The labor, the ability to labor, to think and to build great works of art, great buildings, it's something that is used and abused by a boss. And when you work at an assembly line or you're a cashier at a grocery store, you're not going to tell me that that work is in some way physically and mentally uplifting. If you were to focus just on that work for your 8-hour shift, well, you're going to get physically exhausted, and mentally you're just going to stagnate because you're not developing your capacity as a person. You're stagnating. You're becoming almost deformed, and if you do that for your whole life, how are you going to really develop your capacity to paint, to write, or to do whatever your great life's passion is? It's kind of hard. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying for such and such hours, your labor, your great human capacity, it doesn't belong to you. It's being used by a boss in a physically and mentally degrading fashion. And the worker, instead of his labor becoming his prime want and need, it's something imposed upon him. It's forced labor. You're not going to tell me that most people actually want to be cashiers or to work in an assembly line just twisting a screw every 5 seconds. Is that your life's passion? I don't think so. I think it's not developing your human capacity. And so you're only at home in leisure. You're only at home when you're doing the things that are no different from what an animal does. You're enjoying your time off from work when you can eat, when you can drink, when you can have sex. Now you can say that, those things are great, but animals do them too. But animals don't paint, they don't write, and they don't build buildings the way humans do. They haven't produced great works of literature, but humans have. And suddenly the things that are very much animal, the things that are animal in us are when we feel most human: eating, drinking, having sex. Obviously those things are necessary, but they're not all that defines a person. Why can't every person develop their full potential? But when you're working for a boss, when you're working for capital, you can't. Your labor's forced. It's imposed upon you. And that's what Marx is saying. Labor is not a satisfaction of your needs developing your physical and mental capabilities, and becoming a rich social individual with rich social needs. It's so you have enough to eat, so you have shelter and clothes. So and when you're at work, you're gonna try and do whatever you can to work as little as possible. You're gonna play. You're gonna try and reclaim your humanity by goofing off, by horseplaying. That's what we do. And that's part of the condition, not just of capitalist exploitation and the value surplus value, but it's very much dealing with this whole question of alienation and forced labor due to the cash nexus, due to capitalist exploitation. And again, and to sum it up, labor is what makes us human. When a writer writes, when I write, when I draw, it's very much an expression of my physical and mental capabilities. But when you work, when you're taking what's most human to you, your mind, your hand, your ability to labor, doesn't belong to you for 8 or more hours. It belongs to a boss. And that's what Marx is getting at with this theory of alienation. He's showing us, in a sense, a condition that's very much still with us. Not only is the worker receiving less than the full value of his labor, the worker is not even allowed to develop their full capacity as a person. And and Marx, with communism, thought the free development of each would be the precondition for the free development of all. And that idea of communism stayed very much with him through his whole life. And getting past alienation, overcoming it, so we can all develop our capacity as a human, is very much Marx's conception of communism that he didn't just deal with in his early days, but carried over in his life through his writing of Capital, through his activism in the First International, through all his writings. Marx was very much wanted a condition where we could all develop as full human beings, past alienation. And Marx analyzed this in many ways, not just through his writings on alienation, but his writings on capitalist exploitation. And that's, in a nutshell, some of Marx's concept of alienation. So this is Ina. Until next time.